Welcome to the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy's 2022 Wright Spirit Award ceremony. Introduced in 1991, the Wright Spirit Award recognizes extraordinary individuals and organizations that have preserved the legacy of Frank Lloyd Wright through their tireless dedication and persistent efforts. It is the highest accolade bestowed by the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy, whose mission is to facilitate the preservation and stewardship of the remaining built works designed by Frank Lloyd Wright through advocacy, education, and technical services. The award in the private category honors owners of Wright-designed houses who have rescued a building or have demonstrated outstanding stewardship in its conservation. The Conservancy honors Jack Reed in the private category for his rescue, restoration, and protection of the Glassner House in Glencoe, Illinois. Designed in 1905, the house's relatively small size was a contributing factor in allowing it to be promoted as the servantless house after it was completed. Unfortunately, by the 1990s, this size became a threat to the house's conservation in Glencoe, which had become an affluent suburb, where older houses were being replaced by new, larger ones. The land on which the Glassner House sat was becoming more valuable without the house than with it. In the mid-1990s, the Conservancy worked to find a preservation-minded buyer for the house. Then, in 2003, the house was on the market again and under threat. In March 2003, Jack Reed stepped in to save the house from a very possible tear-down fate. But that's not all Jack did. He took on the thorough restoration of the house. In past decades, the house had undergone various remodelings. Changes to it were obscuring Wright's original intentions. Original plaster colors had been covered and woodwork painted. Jack worked with Vinci Hamp architects to identify and recreate original finishes. Structurally, the house was not in good shape either. The sloped ceiling of the living room was pushing out against the room's side walls. A solution was devised to carefully insert steel into the walls and ceiling of the room to reinforce the house. Today, the house has been returned to its original condition. Major interiors have been completely restored, and the main floor, kitchen, and bath have been sensitively renovated, returning them to near original state. The lower level has also been renovated to provide additional living space, making the house more attractive to future residents. In 2021, to protect his legacy at the Glassner House from future threats, Jack donated to the Conservancy a preservation easement which covers the house's exterior and major spaces of its interior. And he's not done yet. He's currently working with 2022 Wright Spirit Award recipient Carol Yetkin to restore the house's ravine-side landscape. For his dedication to the restoration and protection of the Glassner House, the Conservancy honors Jack Reed with the Wright Spirit Award in the private category. For the rescue, restoration, and sensitive renovation of the Alice and George Millard House in Highland Park, Illinois, the Conservancy honors the late Gail Rothner and Eric Rothner with the Wright Spirit Award in the private category. In late 2015, Highland Park resident Gail Rothner drove down Lake Avenue and saw something that concerned her: a notice for the application to demolish the Alice and George Millard House designed by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1906. The prior owners had marketed the house for sale for more than 3 years but were unable to sell it. Financially unable to carry the house much longer, the owners applied for a demolition permit from Highland Park by July of 2015. The Conservancy had been working to find a solution to save the house. Potential buyers gave feedback that the house needed a lot of work, and it did not have the conveniences that 21st century buyers expected. The Rothners and their team, including architect Douglas Gilbert, gave the house new life by making major infrastructure improvements and sensitively updating it to meet contemporary expectations. Gail took a particularly active part in the process. Noticeable changes begin at the house's entry hall, where a bench that originally separated the entry door from the hall's main space was recreated. Floors and wood trim throughout the house were refinished. Gail was particularly proud of the kitchen. She and Doug Gilbert marked out several options on the floor of the small space before she made her decision on the final scheme. The room was too small to allow a well-functioning space and meet contemporary expectations for an eat-in kitchen. The Rothner's daughter weighed in, recommending that the kitchen and dining room be opened up to one another. To do this, Gale took a nod from Wright's original plan. Wright originally designed built-in cabinets and shelving for an alcove in the dining room wall adjacent to the kitchen. Alice and George Millard constructed the alcove but not the built-ins. The new design opened the upper wall of the alcove, creating a pass-through between the rooms and providing counter space and cabinets below facing both kitchen and dining room. Upstairs, the original layout included 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a sewing room. One of the commonly stated drawbacks by prospective buyers was that the house lacked bedrooms with attached baths. Gale rectified this by turning the sewing room into a dressing room and bath for the adjacent bedroom. Similarly, she united the 2 existing bathrooms to the other bedrooms, creating a total of 3 master suites. Each bathroom was updated. The bathroom's cabinet-lined dressing areas free up floor space in the bedrooms for seating areas instead of storage. The basement underwent some of the least visible but most important work to bring the house up to date. Underground, around the exterior of the basement wall, contractors installed a completely new perimeter drainage system. The heating system was also completely redone, and air conditioning was added. The entire piping system for the plumbing was replaced, and wiring, which included the original knob and tube, was fully updated. Before renovations, the basement's poor conditions and low ceiling height made it impractical as a living space. In the course of renovations, Gale decided to lower the basement floor by almost a foot. This provided the house with additional living space, including a bedroom and full bath. When the work was completed, the Rothners donated the house to the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago, intending the sale of the house to benefit the organization. Sadly, Gale died in October 2021, but she left a legacy of good works. The Conservancy honors Patrick Schwartz and William Levy for their restoration and protection of the Mary Adams House in Highland Park, Illinois. The Adams House was designed by Wright in 1905. The house, with 2,700 square feet plus a basement, is medium-sized by Wright standards, but small for contemporary Highland Park standards. Like other Wright-designed houses in affluent neighborhoods, the house's preservation was by no means assured before Patrick and Bill purchased it in 2010. The house they bought had passed through several owners, and it showed the wear of a century of changes and neglect. Glaring white paint covered the exterior stucco. Layers of paint covered the exterior wood, and foundation plantings obscured the house's relationship with its site. Many interior finishes and details had also been lost or altered. The kitchen and bathrooms sorely needed to be renovated with a historic perspective. The bedrooms were uninviting, and the basement was still in a relatively primitive state. Working with John Eifler of Eifler Associates Architects, a 2022 Wright Spirit Award honoree in the professional category, Patrick and Bill launched into a full-scale restoration of the house. Critical infrastructure, including foundation repairs and replacement, were implemented. After color analysis, a new coat of stucco tinted to match the original color was applied. In addition, all exterior wood was stripped, sanded, and stained to the original color to unify the exterior of the house. Work also involved structurally reinforcing the sagging first and second floors and roof framing, and installing all new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Restoration of the exterior returned the house to Wright's original design, with landscaping based on Wright's original landscape plan. A small Wright-designed storage shed also was restored. On the interior, details were restored, including returning the stairway and wooden screen to their original design. The kitchen was updated with cabinets based on Wright's own drawings, and a discreet bump-out on the east wall allowed for more generous space within. The upstairs former servant's bedroom was converted into a new bath and closet for the primary bedroom, and the basement provided additional living space, including a home office and gym. Sustainability was a key goal of the restoration. Insulation was added to the attic, above the ceiling and to exterior walls. Recyclable metal shingles were installed on the roof. A geothermal heating and cooling system was also installed, and insulating glass interior storm windows were fabricated for each of the 90-plus windows. The project took 14 months, during which time Patrick and Bill petitioned to have the house recognized as a Highland Park local landmark. This means that the exterior of the house cannot be altered without the approval of the Highland Park Historic Preservation Commission. Seen here with architect John Eifler and his wife Bonnie Phoenix, Patrick and Bill celebrate the project's completion. For their efforts to restore and legally protect the Adams House, the Conservancy honors Patrick Schwarz and Bill Levy with the Wright Spirit Award in the private category. For their rescue of the original bedroom wing of the Coonley House in Riverside, Illinois, the Conservancy honors Stephanus Grief and the late John Farneda with the Wright Spirit Award in the private category. In the 1950s, the Coonley House was divided into two dwellings, with the bedroom wing becoming a separate residence from the main part of the house. In the early 2010s, the former owner essentially abandoned the bedroom wing, which was neglected for over 5 years before John Farneda and Fanny Grief bought it in 2015. The condition of the bedroom wing was not only a threat to the house itself, but also created an unstable neighbor for the main wing to which the bedroom wing was directly attached, as well as the other nearby buildings of the former Coonley estate, the gardener's cottage and the coach house. John grew up near Riverside and would cross it every day going to school. He developed a love for its winding streets, and when the Coonley House bedroom wing became available, he was anxious to bring it back to its former condition. He and Fanny had many projects to address, including, at the garage, water had been freely entering the structure. They interviewed numerous contractors, many of whom thought the building was so far gone that they recommended demolition rather than restoration. That recommendation was not followed. At the porte cochere, 3 layers of ceiling were removed to reveal rotted wood framing. This framing was replaced, the area insulated, and a new plaster ceiling installed. In the courtyard, walls had seriously deteriorated, and window openings had been altered. Restoration of the walls provided the opportunity to restore original window openings. Other critically deteriorated wall areas were restored as well, as were the house's numerous art glass windows. At the former master bedroom dressing room, a window had been added to the lower level. This area was restored to its original configuration. The rotted area of the planter above was also reconstructed, as was the failing roof. Inside, most of the plaster and wood surfaces had been water damaged, and after the roof reconstruction was completed, were in need of restoration. Specific projects included the recreation of the fireplace in what had been the master bedroom. Using a historic photograph and Wright's drawings, the fireplace was restored. Interior windows of the guest rooms were also refinished. John and Fanny put their own sweat equity into the house. John is seen here working on interior finishes, while Fanny takes a break from replastering. Here are some images of the house as it is today. The restoration took several years to complete. Tragically, soon after this, John died of cancer in March of 2021. But he, along with Fanny, has left an important legacy. For their rescue and restoration of the bedroom wing of the Coonley House, the Conservancy recognizes John Farneda and Fanny Grief with the Wright Spirit Award in the private category. The Wright Spirit Award in the public category honors organizations or individuals who have promoted Frank Lloyd Wright's work in the public arena or have rescued a public building. For their team effort in the rescue and relocation of the Booth Cottage, the Conservancy honors the Glencoe Historical Society, the Village of Glencoe, and the Glencoe Park District. The Booth Cottage was built in Glencoe, Illinois in 1913 as a temporary home for Elizabeth and Sherman Booth and their children, while their permanent house nearby was being constructed. Despite its simple frame construction, its design was carefully thought out. This photo, given to the Glencoe Historical Society by Booth descendants, was critical in understanding its original form. And in several ways, with its flat roof construction, broad eaves, and banded windows, the cottage may be considered a precursor to Wright's Usonian houses. After the Booth's permanent house was completed, the cottage was sold and moved from its original location to a site a few hundred yards south on Franklin Road in Glencoe. The cottage was added to several times, obscuring its original simplicity. A porte-cochere was added in the front, a garage to the side, and additional bedrooms to the back. In the 1950s, the interior was updated. Its previous owner died in 2014, and the future of the cottage looked precarious. As a small house in an affluent neighborhood, its lot appeared to be a prime target for demolition and redevelopment. The Conservancy worked with the Glencoe Historical Society and the village of Glencoe to monitor the cottage. The cottage was put on the market in October of 2017. Efforts were made to locate a preservation-minded buyer, but by April 2019, such a buyer had not been identified, and the Conservancy nominated the cottage to Landmarks Illinois' 11 Most Endangered list. The cottage sold in 2019. Preservationists' worst fears were realized when, a week later, the new owner submitted an application for demolition permit. Advocates for the cottage had two tools on their side. The cottage was an honorary Glencoe landmark, which carried with it an automatic demolition delay of 6 months. Also, the village does not grant demolition permits on a property until the building permit for the property has been approved. The village, led by village manager Philip Corrali, used these tools to keep the owner engaged with preservationists. Because the cottage had been moved once from its original location, moving it again was considered a much more viable option than it would have been otherwise. But its ties to Wright's work in the adjacent Ravine Bluffs development focused efforts on a nearby move. Village manager Corrali was committed to the preservation of the cottage and keeping it in Glencoe. The Conservancy put out a request for proposals to move the cottage and received several responses. The response from the Glencoe Historical Society was viable, and it would keep the cottage in Glencoe. The village and the Glencoe Historical Society worked with the new owner of the cottage to come to an agreement to move the building from its site. Finding a location to move the cottage to became a major hurdle. The Historical Society originally proposed to move the cottage to its campus in the center of Glencoe, but when this became infeasible, a new site needed to be found. As early as June 2019, representatives from the Conservancy and the village met with the Glencoe Park District to inquire about the possibility of moving the cottage to Park District land. After the Historical Society committed to moving the cottage, discussions with the Park District moved forward, and eventually an ideal site was located adjacent to the Ravine Bluffs neighborhood. In early 2020, the Park District posted the proposal to move the cottage to Park 7N and held meetings to allow discussion on the project. While there was much local support for the proposal, support was not unanimous. The Park District shepherded discussion and held firm to its decision to lease the site to the Historical Society. And the Historical Society, an all-volunteer organization, made a major financial commitment to save the cottage. By summer 2020, necessary plans were in place, and on July 21st, the cottage was moved to its new location with local media fanfare. It is partnerships that make most preservation efforts successful. The saving of Booth Cottage is a laudable example of multiple parties coming together to achieve a preservation goal. For this, the Conservancy recognizes the Glencoe Historical Society, the Village of Glencoe, the Glencoe Park District, with its Wright Spirit Award in the public category. For the purchase, restoration, and opening to the public of the Laurent House in Rockford, Illinois, the Conservancy honors the Laurent House Foundation with the Wright Spirit Award in the public category. The foundation purchased the house from original clients Kenneth and Phyllis Laurent in 2011. Over the last 10 years, it has been the mission of the foundation to preserve the house, its original furnishings and archives, and to inform the public about Wright's only house designed to be accessible to a client in a wheelchair. In 1948, Ken and Phyllis Laurent wrote to Frank Lloyd Wright to request that he design a house for them that specifically addressed Ken's needs. The Laurents were a young married couple when Ken joined the Navy during World War II. Sadly, in 1946, Ken was diagnosed with a spinal cord tumor that left him paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. But this did not stop the Laurents. Ken had a successful career with the National Lock Company in Rockford, and in the 1950s, the Laurents adopted their 2 children, son Mark and daughter Jean. The Laurents lived in their house for over 60 years. In Ken's words, "This house has helped me to focus on my capabilities, not my disability. That is the true gift Mr. Wright gave me." In 1959, Taliesin Associated Architects, under the direction of John Howe, enlarged the house to accommodate the Laurents' growing family. By the early 2010s, the Laurents were both in their 90s and felt that it was time to pass the house on to new stewards. At this time, Ken and his friend Jerry Heinzeroth began to discuss the idea that the house could become a public site that showed how beautiful design made daily life better and easier for someone with a physical disability. Jerry and Barbara Heinzeroth had met the Laurents through John and Marcia Cook. John was the Laurents' landscape architect and a mutual friend of the Heinzeroths and the Laurents. Ken was pleased with the idea that the house might become a public site, but he also recognized the need he and Phyllis had to fund through the sale of the house the next phase of their lives in an assisted living community. In November 2011, Jerry received a call from Ken Laurent saying that the house would be auctioned in 30 days. Jerry led early foundation board members to find the financial help they needed. The group raised the $500,000 needed to go to auction, and in mid-December, this group was the winning bidder for the house. Just a month later, in January 2012, Ken died knowing the house was in good hands. Phyllis died the following December. With the purchase of the house, the foundation's efforts just began. In 2012, the house was added to the National Register of Historic Places. In 2013, Eifler and Associate Architects completed a historic structure report that provided a roadmap for the restoration of the house. This roadmap became critical when, during the spring of 2013, storm damage caused the roof of the house to collapse. Thus began a year-long, $500,000 restoration project culminating with the house opening to the public in 2014. In June 2014, community leaders came together in Rockford to celebrate the Laurent House. Speakers included Foundation Board President Jerry Heinzeroth and then Conservancy Executive Director Janet Halstead. Since the house opened, the Foundation has worked to expand its tour program, and it has welcomed visitors from around the world. To accommodate these visitors, in 2019, the Laurent House Foundation, under the leadership of Jerry Heinzeroth, and with significant funding from the Tawani Foundation, raised nearly $750,000 to buy and restore an existing 1928 house across the street from the Laurent House to serve as a visitor center. The visitor center includes a gift shop, parking, offices, conference space, accessible public restrooms, and archive storage. Importantly, the visitor center allows all spaces of the Laurent House itself to be fully restored. When asked about his wish for the house, Ken Laurent said in December of 2011,
"Well, I'd like to see it become a museum, and Jerry's going to see to it. Maybe that happens someday. That way I can come back in 2090 and it'll still be here just like this."
Exactly.
I don't want to change, and I hope they don't change it, because this is the way it's supposed to be.
For its commitment to the vision of Ken and Phyllis Laurent, and for the preservation of the legacy of Frank Lloyd Wright at the Laurent House, the Conservancy honors the Laurent House Foundation with the Wright Spirit Award in the public category. The Wright Spirit Award in the professional category honors individuals who, through architectural, scholarly, or other endeavors, have advanced the knowledge and increased the appreciation of the work of Frank Lloyd Wright. The Conservancy honors Eifler and Associate Architects for its work on over 24 Frank Lloyd Wright properties, work which combines conscientious restoration and practical rehabilitation practices, including an emphasis on sustainable renovation. Founded in 1990 by John Eifler, Eifler & Associates has a diverse portfolio of work, including one of the largest numbers of restorations of Wright design properties by a single firm. The following projects are highlights of this work. Before the founding of Eifler & Associates, John Eifler was a studio head at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill in Chicago. One of his significant projects there was overseeing the major restoration of the Charnley House. Designed in 1891 by Adler and Sullivan, the Charnley House was worked on by a young Frank Lloyd Wright. In 1990, Eifler & Associates worked with Jim Dennis, owner of Wright's first Jacobs House in Madison, to restore this important work. The structure was in a badly deteriorated condition. The restoration brought this house back from near ruin. Without the work of Dennis and Eifler & Associates, it is unlikely that this seminal design would have been one of 8 Wright buildings inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2019. The Seth Peterson Cottage was another Wright structure in dire condition. Deep in a Wisconsin state park, the house had been abandoned for years before restoration efforts began. Eifler's work here included roof reconstruction, new windows, cabinetry, and woodwork restoration. The flagstone floor was relaid over a new concrete slab containing a new radiant heating system. To furnish the house for rental purposes, Eifler designed furniture to complement Wright's design. At the Willits House in Highland Park, Illinois, work involved the reinforcing of the sagging roof cantilevers, rebuilding of the front structure, and new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Exterior painted stucco was cleaned, exterior woodwork restored, and all interior wood and plaster surfaces restored to their original finish. The Goodrich House in Oak Park, Illinois, has received a similar comprehensive restoration. Lost exterior details were reconstructed. Extensive research was undertaken to recreate the original entry stair and fireplace inglenook. In addition, a geothermal heating and cooling system was installed, as was an extensive amount of insulation, reducing the house's impact on the environment. At the Balch House in Oak Park, a family room was sensitively added to the rear of the house. The distressed front terrace was rebuilt and steel added to support the second-floor porch at the rear. For the Frederick House in Barrington Hills, Illinois, Eifler & Associates developed a master plan which allowed the house to retain its historical integrity, yet carefully modified it to suit the needs of 21st century occupants. The scope included reframing the roof to correct sagging eaves, re-roofing with cedar shakes to match the original plans, the restoration of mitered single-pane glazing, and the restoration of brickwork, woodwork, and the integrally colored floor slabs. The gas-fired boiler was replaced by geothermal heating. Additional clients include the 2022 Wright Spirit honorees Patrick Schwarz and Bill Levy, owners of the Adams House in Highland Park, Illinois, and the Laurent House Foundation, steward of the Laurent House in Rockford, Illinois. John Eifler made a personal commitment to restoring the work of Frank Lloyd Wright in 2010 when he and his wife Bonnie Phoenix took on the restoration of Wright's 1915 Ross House in Glencoe, Illinois as their own residence. The house was so deteriorated that preservationists feared for its future. John was determined that the house could be used as a prototype for sustainable restoration. John and Bonnie began a hands-on restoration that included removing inappropriate additions, restoring exterior stucco and woodwork, installing new electrical and plumbing systems, and geothermal and heating cooling augmented by discreetly placed rooftop solar panels. Eifler & Associates' work on Wright-designed buildings has been recognized by awards from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Landmarks Illinois, and the Commission on Chicago Landmarks. John Eifler is a past board member of the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. In 1999, he was made a Fellow of the American Institute of Architects. For its commitment to the legacy of Frank Lloyd Wright, the Conservancy honors Eifler and Associate Architects and its principal John Eifler with the Wright Spirit Award in the professional category. As a leader in the preservation of historic architecture, especially the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, the Conservancy honors T. Gunny Harbaugh with the Wright Spirit Award in the professional category. Gunny Harbaugh grew up in the Chicago area, and after obtaining a Master of Science in Historic Preservation degree from Columbia University, Gunny worked as a restoration carpenter on the reconstruction of the living room of Wright's second Little House at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This experience led Gunny to obtain a Master of Architecture degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Upon graduation, he returned to Chicago, where he developed a national reputation for the restoration of some of Chicago's most historic buildings while working at the architecture firm McClear. In 2006, he founded his own firm, Harbaugh Architects. Gunny's first major project was the complete rehabilitation of Burnham and Root's 1888 Rookery Building in Chicago, which included the restoration of the primary historic spaces that had been renovated by Wright in 1905. Gunny led the restoration as the head of the preservation group at McClear, the architects for the project. Completed in 1992, the award-winning project received widespread acclaim in both the architectural and popular press. In 2006, while still working for McClear, Gunny led the writing of a restoration master plan for Unity Temple. This in turn led to an in-depth feasibility study completed in 2014 by Harbaugh Architects to more fully understand the scope and costs required for the complete restoration of Unity Temple. In 2015, a generous lead gift from the Alphawood Foundation allowed Harbaugh's expert team to develop a full set of construction documents, and construction began. The transformative restoration, completed in June 2017, has returned this World Heritage Site to its original beauty. In 2012, Harbaugh Architects was commissioned to create a restoration work plan for Roby House, to review the previous work, and to develop a plan to successfully complete the restoration of the house. In 2014, Harbaugh Architects prepared construction documents to complete the interior restoration of another of Wright's World Heritage Sites. The project was focused on restoring all of the original plaster, paint, and wood-trim surfaces of the main historic spaces back to their original appearance. Construction began in 2017 and was completed in 2019. In 2012, Harbaugh Architects was engaged by the current owner of the Bach House to complete the exterior restoration of the house as well as the replication of missing art glass windows, the replication of missing interior millwork, and the installation of a new geothermal heating and cooling system. The exterior restoration included the removal of later changes that had enclosed the sun deck and porch so that the house regained its original design integrity. It was completed in 2014. In 2014, Harbaugh Architects was selected by the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation to develop a preservation master plan for the Taliesin West campus. The plan describes how Taliesin West evolved over time, documented current conditions, and outlined a roadmap for future restoration and long-term care of the core historic campus. A critical part of the document was to establish a preservation philosophy that will guide all future work for the complex. The plan was completed in 2015. The firm is currently working on a project to replace the existing translucent roof panels on Wright's office with a new system using modern fabric technology that will more closely mimic the original canvas used by Wright. The success of the plan for Taliesin West led to a current project for the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, where Harbaugh Architects is developing a conservation master plan for the entire 600-acre Taliesin property. Harbaugh Architects are also currently working with DS&R from New York on a master plan for the Kalita Humphreys Theater in Dallas. The plan includes returning Wright's Theater back to its 1959 appearance and adding additional theater structures in the surrounding park. Other current projects include the exterior restoration of Samara, the Christian House in West Lafayette, Indiana, and a conservation management plan for the Frank Lloyd Wright House in Ebsworth Park, the Krause House near St. Louis. Harbaugh Architects' other restoration work includes important and influential buildings of the late 19th and early 20th century, including work by Daniel Burnham, Halliburton Roche, Louis Sullivan, and Mies van der Rohe. In addition to his work as an architect, Gunny has been a strong advocate for the profession of architecture and for cultural heritage in general. He is a past president of AIA Chicago. He's a founding member of the ICOMOS International Scientific Committee on 20th Century Heritage, past vice president of Landmarks Illinois, and a founding member and past vice president of Docomomo US, where he is still on the board. He is also a past board member of the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. In 2010, he was made a Fellow of the American Institute of Architects. For his leadership and his work, the Conservancy honors T. Gunny Harbaugh with the Wright Spirit Award in the professional category. For her efforts to enhance the landscapes of Wright properties through both aesthetics and infrastructure, the Conservancy honors landscape architect Carol Yetkin with the Wright Spirit Award in the professional category. Having worked on nearly 30 Wright properties, the breadth of Carol Yetkin's experience with the landscapes of Frank Lloyd Wright is unmatched. Her work ranges from conceptual design to construction documents. She conducts research efforts and site assessments, prepares cultural landscape reports, and design recommendations for historic preservation. She has particular expertise in sustainable and urban design. Carol is a LEED accredited professional and actively seeks out strategies on every project to promote green energy, reduce stormwater runoff, and to reuse and recycle resources. She is president and founder of CYLA Design Associates Incorporated, founded in 1993. Carol's work on Wright properties includes at the Westcott House in Springfield, Ohio. CYLA managed a very complex restoration of the landscape in 2001 to 2005, providing a landscape plan that included restoration of the pool and terrace extending out from the living room at the front of the house. And at the rear, the original pergola was revealed and reconstructed, and a cutting garden that is featured in Wright's 1910 Wasmuth portfolio renderings was recreated. CYLA resurrected the site's landscape from unimaginable neglect, working with extremely limited traces of physical evidence and historic documentation. For the Sutton House in McCook, Nebraska, CYLA prepared a garden design based on research of a landscape design for this house, Wright's only residence in Nebraska. The design featured a native plant palette and a garden pool, a trellis, and a garden house to complement the main house. Thorough research of the Bach House by Harbaugh Architects revealed a rich source of photographs of this site close to Lake Michigan. The original site of the house was restored to be consistent with photographs for species, and sandy soils determined a palette of native plant selections. At the Hertley House in Oak Park, because Arthur Hertley was treasurer of Jen Jensen's advocacy group, Our Friends of the Native Landscape, CYLA researched documents and photographs to find evidence of a Jensen plan for the property. Though no such plan was found, CYLA prepared a design with a strong native plant palette, following Jensen's design characteristics. A new terrace using details similar to Wright's enhanced the outdoor living space. At the Harry Adams House, Wright's last house in Oak Park, CYLA introduced a gravel path through a naturalized woodland area and a wetland garden to assist in controlling stormwater problems on a portion of the site. The front elevation was enhanced by plantings, and a terrace was introduced at the back of the house, using terracotta details prevalent at the time of the house's construction. At the Balch House in Oak Park, CYLA provided a planting design and layout for the site that included a reconfigured driveway and a terrace at the rear of the house. Pathways and perennials were introduced into the backyard to extend a pollinator garden effect, and new shrubs and small trees with edible features were added. The front yard was returned entirely to native grasses, sedges, and forbs. CYLA prepared a cultural landscape report with the development of a master landscape plan for the grounds of Fabian Villa located on the Fox River. The project included historic research into an extensive archive of documentation. Recommendations for the landscape treatment of the site included the design of ADA accessible paths and other improvements to facilitate public visitation to the site. For the Catherine and Lloyd Lewis House, located on a floodplain on the banks of the Des Plaines River, CYLA developed ground swales that would move water away from the house and toward the river. Work also included a woodland management plan to remove invasive species from the site and provide a healthful pruning of the magnificent oak trees throughout the property. The Winslow House, though it's on a flat site in suburban river forest, also required a creative and inconspicuous means of moving water away from the house. Here, CYLA created an underground bioswale system to receive rainwater runoff from the roof drains and the sump pump. This large system is disguised under a lawn panel to the side of the driveway, which looks the same as it did before. Native grasses were introduced to complement the house and screen utilities. New terraces, a stepping stone path, and flowering shrubs and perennials enhanced the garden. And at the Glassner House in Glencoe, with client Jack Reed, a 2022 Wright Spirit Award honoree, CYLA is completing a comprehensive restoration of the grading of the north side of the house, securing the steep ravine slope and returning its appearance to the time of the house's original construction. CYLA's successful restorations of Wright's landscapes depend on an intimate knowledge of his work and philosophy paired with a practical experience. Along with her practice, among other activities, Carol Yetkin has served as a faculty member of the School of the Art Institute Historic Preservation Program and has taught a course in historic preservation at the Illinois Institute of Technology Landscape Architecture Program. She serves as a member of the American Society of Landscape Architects Committee for the implementation of historical American landscape survey documentation and is a former member of the Illinois Historic Sites Advisory Council, which reviews National Register nominations. For her dedication to the restoration of the landscape designs of Frank Lloyd Wright, the Conservancy honors Carol Yetkin with the Wright Spirit Award in the professional category. The Wright Spirit Award in the Special Honors category honors outstanding individuals or organizations whose work represents a unique contribution to the preservation of the legacy of Frank Lloyd Wright. The Conservancy honors Colonel Jennifer N. Pritzker for her leadership in the Wright community through philanthropy and the restoration of the Bach House. Colonel Pritzker's lifelong passion for history and historic places began when she was a child, spending a lot of time at her grandparents' home on the north side of Chicago. The home was eventually sold and demolished. Colonel Pritzker felt a sense of loss, wishing she had been in a position to save the property and the memories that went with it. Similar, her family's home in Oberlin, Ohio, was next door to Wright's Welzheimer house, which she found fascinating. These experiences created an interest in preserving history through the places we experience every day. In 1974, she enlisted in the U.S. Army. Her active duty ended in 1985, and she retired from the Illinois Army National Guard as Lieutenant Colonel in 2001. In 1996, Colonel Pritzker created the Tawani Foundation. The foundation's focuses reflect her interests in military causes, gender and human sexuality, the environment, and of course, historic preservation. Wright's work is particularly appealing to the foundation due to the intentional nature of his design. Everything in his buildings has a reason behind it, be it a hallway, room, or window. Each project is unique and no two buildings are alike. The foundation uses a similar, intentional approach to its philanthropic funding choices, and it appreciates innovation and purpose in all grantee projects. Tawani's philanthropy has been important to several Wright design properties. Between 2016 and 2021, the foundation donated nearly $2 million to the restoration of Unity Temple. In 2020 and 2021, Tawani provided support to the Laurent House Foundation. As the only Wright house designed specifically to accommodate a disabled veteran, the project was meaningful because it connects to her interest in honoring the military. In 2020, the foundation provided critical funding to the Glencoe Historical Society, allowing the organization's plan to save the Booth Cottage to move forward. Colonel Pritzker's purchase of Wright's 1915 Bach House in Chicago ensured a particularly personal commitment to the work of Frank Lloyd Wright. She built on restoration work by the previous owner to bring the house back to its original state. Exterior work included considerable masonry and concrete repair and reconstruction, wood restoration, and the opening of a rear second-floor porch, which had been enclosed. Millwork elements were reconstructed and art glass windows recreated. The house is now available for tours, overnight stays, and events. A vital component of Colonel Pritzker's vision for historic preservation is finding uses for historic sites that will be self-sustaining. Philanthropy must be accompanied by a sound business plan to assure long-term viability and plans to increasingly reach the public. She believes this creates a sense of ownership by the local community as well as preservationists worldwide.
Saving selected vintage buildings like the Emil Bach House is important because it allows us to have a vision of our collective identity. Where did we come from? What came before us? And that's important because it helps us better understand where we are now and where we might be going in the future.
I think it was a very nice thing for Colonel Pritzker to take this project, to undertake it, to bring back the reality of what was in the past. I know it was a tremendous undertaking, not only financially, but through all the other resources that were put into the building to make it what it is now.
And I think from what I know of Frank Lloyd Wright as a human, I think this is what he would have wanted. He never intended, I think, for any of his buildings to remain as static display items only. He built them to be used. So I think what we are doing, everything that we have done, I think is consistent with his original vision. I'm very confident of that. Now we'll see if I'm right or not.
Time has shown the strength of Colonel Pritzker's vision. For her leadership and her commitment to the preservation of the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, the Conservancy honors Colonel Jennifer N. Pritzker with its Wright Spirit Award in the Special Honors category.